about 6 years ago now. Don't seem like it doesn't long. 6 years ago he passed away. And I tell you, I loved him dearly, and I'm not just saying this because he was my dad, but he was the smartest man I knew. He knew a little bit about everything, didn't he, Uncle Paul?
Yeah, yeah.
And
Wise. That's great.
he knew a whole lot about the Bible. He knew a little about everything, but a whole lot about the Bible. And he knew how to minister to the needs of his flock. And he knew how to treat people. And he was very protective of his family and his congregation.
Yes.
And he wouldn't let just anybody preach at his church. He didn't want them to come in there and try to ruffle feathers. So I was talking to Uncle Rodney a couple weeks back, and he told Dad that, Dad told him that he liked it when Uncle Rodney preached and spoke for him because he didn't come in there and try to straighten everybody out. And there is people that do that. They come in and they go to church and they say, well, I'm going to straighten everybody out today. Pastor's not doing his job, so let me do my job. But Dad was a ton of fun to be around, and it didn't matter what you were doing, what he was doing, or what was going on, he was happy to see you. And you know when you go to people's house whether they're happy to see you or not, you know. If they're happy to see you, they got a smile, they say, come on in. And if they're not, it's like, what are you doing here? You know? You can tell when they're not happy to see you. Patricia and me, when we were, I guess we were teenagers, probably 11, 12 years old, but we got a spanking one time for getting a soda, didn't we, Trish?
I don't remember you getting soda.
Well, here's what happened. This is my memory. You know, everybody remembers it different.
But I didn't get it. I asked for it. Let's get it.
Yeah. Well, you stood out front, but us kids, it was us and our cousins, and it was hot summertime. And we didn't have a penny to our name. We didn't even have a nickel to our name, or a penny. We didn't have nothing. And so we went down to the store, though. That didn't stop us from going down to the store and going inside and looking at the sodas and saying, ooh, this soda sure look good. And just saying it over and over in the store owner right here. And finally he said, you kids get your soda. He felt sorry for us, you know, about 3 or 4 of us. And I think we brought Trisha one out the front. That's the way it went through. You don't remember?
I just know I didn't say the words.
Yeah.
I just benefited from it.
Well, anyway, we got home that night. We were sitting down having supper. And I said, man, we got us a free soda today, Dad. And he said, what? I said, well, we went down there and he just gave us a free soda. And so he started investigating. He found out what had happened. And he said, I'm going to give you kids a spanking after supper. Because he had told us before not to go down to that store if we didn't have any money and be begging. And so in his mind, we were just begging for sodas. And so we had to sit there through supper. And then he was good to his word. He lined us up and gave it to us. But we didn't go down there begging anymore. That was the last time. I didn't really understand that too much, but I understand it now. You know. And I love my dad so much, and I miss him so much. And you know, he liked to play chess. We'd play chess sometimes from 6 o'clock in the morning to midnight.
Yeah, I played with him myself and beat him.
Oh my goodness, really? He was a good chess player. So we got really competitive with him, and we would play all day long. And sometimes, you know, you think if you played all day long, you'd get in about 10 games. Not us. It'd take 3 games would last us all day because we sat there and thought, and messed with each other's minds, trying to win. I'd go to the bathroom, I'd come back, my queen would be missing off the board, and Dad would be sitting there smiling. But he was always ready to set aside whatever it was he was doing and invite you in and help you with your problem. And I could write a book about Dad. But the main thing that he exuded from every fiber of his being is love. He loved people. And his messages were love, forgiveness, and grace. That's what he preached. And one of his faults, if you can call this a fault, was he let people take advantage of him. He'd help the homeless people that asked for it, even if he knew they were running a game on him. he would still help them.
Yeah.
And I called him on that fault. I told him, Dad, quit helping these people. They're just taking advantage of him. And he told me that he'd rather, he never wanted to be responsible for not helping someone that asked. And he would help them even though he knew they were taking advantage of him. But happy Father's Day to all you fathers out there. Remember that whatever time you take to do something with your kids, they will appreciate it someday. They sure will. So we're going to be starting, Brother Harold, in the 16th chapter of Matthew, verse 1. And last chapter, Jesus' disciples got in trouble by the Pharisees for not washing their hands. Remember that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Jesus had to straighten out the Pharisees and let them know that it's not what goes in to the mouth, but what comes out that defiles a man. So what happened after that? Jesus and his disciples traveled 50 miles to see a Canaanite woman and to heal her daughter of demon possession.
Yes, he did.
They returned to the Decapolis region, and great multitudes brought their lame, blind, dumb, and maimed, and many others, and cast them down at Jesus' feet, and he healed them.
They knew the Savior.
I'll stop right there for a minute and focus on who Jesus healed. It wasn't just people with allergies or people with headaches. He was healing the lame, the blind, the dumb, and the maimed.
Has all power.
And I looked up maimed in Webster's, and it means serious physical injury, loss of a member of the body. So some of these people were going in there with no arms, or maybe one arm or one leg.
Wait, put the ear back on Peter.
That's right. And what was Jesus doing? He was healing these people. And they were walking away whole. He was recreating arms and legs right there on the spot. That's amazing, isn't it?
Yes.
And if that wasn't enough, he fed 4,000 men plus women and children with 7 loaves of bread and a few fish. And they were all filled up with food too. Nobody went away hungry. They gathered up much more food than they started with. And the main difference between Jesus feeding the 5,000 and the 4,000 was the 5,000 were almost all Jews. And the 4,000 was Jews and Gentiles mixed. And Jesus had performed miracle after miracle after miracle, but that still wasn't enough for him. So let's start with chapter 16, verse 1. Now I read the first 2 or 3 verses last week, but we refreshed memory because a lot of you were gone last week due to sickness or vacation or the Bible school down there. Verse 1 says, the Pharisees also with the Sadducees came, and tempting desired him that he would show them a sign from heaven.
Testing him.
He answered and said unto them, when it is evening, you say it will be fair weather, for the sky is red.
That's a sign.
And in the morning it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and lowering.
That's a sign.
Oh, you hypocrites! You can discern the face of the sky, but can you not discern the signs of the time? A wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign. And there shall no sign be given unto it but the sign of the prophet Jonah.
Yeah.
And he left them and departed. Boom, he walked out.
Amen. How about that?
Now, the tension is hitting new heights now with the Pharisees. It's just going to keep on going up. And in chapter 15, it got so bad that Jesus started ministering to the Gentiles. He left the Jews alone for a little bit and went straight to the Gentiles and started. In verse 1 it says, the Pharisees also with the Sadducees came, and tempting desired him that he would show them a sign from heaven. Now the fact that these two groups are working together showed a deep fear that the religious leaders had. Why? The Pharisees and the Sadducees didn't even get along. They had nothing in common but hypocrisy. The fact that they could forget their differences and come together in opposition to Jesus shows that they regarded Jesus as a very serious threat. The Pharisees lived to the letter of the law, an oral law, and anything else that was written down.
So everyone can see him.
The Sadducees only went by the written word of the Hebrew Scripture. The Pharisees believed in angels and in the resurrection of the dead. The Sadducees did not. The Pharisees were not a political party. They were happy to live under any government that would leave them alone to practice their religion if they wanted to. As long as they left them alone, they could walk around looking important. They didn't care who was governing.
Let the good times roll.
The Sadducees were aristocrats, and they were leaders. And they collaborated with the Romans to keep their wealth and their power. And finally, the Pharisees looked for and they longed for a Messiah. They just didn't think Jesus was a Messiah. The Sadducees didn't look for a Messiah so much. But yet, for all these differences, they came together to oppose Jesus.
They couldn't deny Jesus.
You could say Jesus brought them together, couldn't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And what did they want? They wanted a sign from heaven. Now remember, up to this point, Jesus has done many miracles.
And Jesus was right there in front of them.
But according to verse 1, they wanted a sign from heaven, not earth. And if you could write, I am the Lord your God, and fire in the sky, maybe they would believe that. Or if you could send fire down from heaven and consume a Roman legion, maybe, then they would believe. They were trying to manipulate Jesus. They were like, show us the signs we want to see, then we will believe.
Jesus did come for those shows.
What did Jesus say in response? In verse 3, hypocrites.
They actors.
You know how to discern the face of the sky, you cannot discern the signs of the time. Jesus condemned their hypocrisy. People today who can't see the signs of the second coming of Christ are as blind as the religious leaders back in Jesus' day who couldn't see the first coming of Christ. Verse 4 says, a wicked and adulterous generation seeks a sign. And that statement by Jesus reminds us that signs alone convert no one. The problem was they were a wicked and adulterous generation.
Oh, that's lying game.
And that's why they were seeking after a sign. And the Bible gives repeated examples of those who say saw remarkable signs and still do not believe. And what comes to my mind is the Exodus. Remember the people, they survived all the plagues. The people saw the Red Sea part in front of their eyes. They walked across on dry land, and they drank water from a rock, ate bread that fell out of the sky, actually heard God's voice while Moses was up on the mountain, but still had Aaron make a golden calf they could worship and give the credit to. Verse 4 says, no sign be given unto it, but the sign of the prophet Jonah. And he left them and departed. So Jesus did give them a sign. It wasn't what they were looking for, though. Jesus says the sign he will give is a sign that will have power that will bring people to faith.
Raised from the dead.
And the sign that has power to bring people to faith is the sign of his own resurrection.
Because he lives.
Jesus previously mentioned the sign of the prophet Jonah back in Matthew, the 12th chapter. How about a little review? There we go. What are some of the similarities between Jonah and Jesus? Both Jonah and Jesus sacrificed themselves so other people could be saved. Isn't that exactly what Jonah did?
Yeah.
Jonah's on a boat. The boat's going to sink. The waves are crashing about. And the boat's about to go under and it's filling up with water. And the sailors are terrified. And what does Jonah say?
Throw me out.
He says, sacrifice me. Throw me into the deep so you can be saved. That's what he did. And that's exactly what happened. As soon as they threw him into the water, what happened? The storm calmed. And the sailors were saved because Jonah sacrificed himself. And then after 3 days in which no one had seen Jonah, nobody had laid eyes, a human eye had not seen Jonah for 3 days, he came back and started preaching repentance. I have a feeling old Jonah was preaching his heart out, don't you? He might have been bleached white a little bit because he's doing that belly whale or great fish, however you want to look at it.
I'll say he was convinced.
You see this ongoing battle that Jesus has with these religious leaders. So he leads them saying, hey, listen, you are a wicked and adulterous generation. He didn't say, well, basically, you're good people, you're just misled. No, he called them wicked and adulterous generation, and on top of that, he called them hypocrites. I don't recommend that we do that, but Jesus can get by with that.
Yes.
Can you imagine saying that to a delegation of scribes and Pharisees and Sadducees? These men would be the officials, the men in the nice suits, Brother Harold, with all the official credentials, with all their heavy gold-plated business cards. These were the heavy dudes, man, the men with the money.
Yes, they got hot too.
And Jesus tells them that they are a wicked and adulterous generation. And the only sign I'm going to give you is the sign of the prophet Jonah.
Did you read the scriptures?
So Jesus has to explain this to his disciples in verse 5. Let's pick it up there, Brother Jerry. Verse 5. And when his disciples were come to the other side, they had forgotten to take bread. I see another problem coming up, don't you? These disciples, man, they're always getting into something. Then Jesus said unto them, take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, is it because we have taken no bread? Which when Jesus perceived, he said unto them, O you of little faith, why reason you among yourselves, because you have brought no bread? Do you not yet understand, neither remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000 and how many baskets you took up? Neither the 7 loaves or the 4,000 or how many baskets you took up?
Jesus is teaching.
How is it that you do not understand that I spoke it not to you concerning bread?
Yeah.
That you should beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees.
Beware of false Christ too.
Then understood they how that he bade them not beware of the leaven of bread, but of the doctrine of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Very interesting here, isn't it? So they get back in the boat, and they're going along, and Jesus tells them, he tells the disciples, now beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And they start thinking among themselves, beware of the leaven. You see, that means bread. We didn't bring any bread. Jesus must be hungry. We're kind of hungry. Where's the bread? Where's the beef? Y'all remember that old commercial? Where's the beef? They said, where's the bread? Jesus used the metaphor of leaven to try to teach the disciples, but they're not getting it. What Jesus wanted to do was impress the importance of being on guard against false teaching, especially false teaching that supports religious hypocrisy.
Man's traditions.
And that's what these two groups had in common. Hypocrisy. Remember all the things I was saying they wasn't alike? Well, they were alike in that they were hypocrites. How do I know this? Because Jesus called them hypocrites.
But Jesus is the Savior.
In the midst of all of this, wouldn't you think that Jesus would say, you disciples, oh, you're so ignorant, you are so unbelieving, you're so forgetful. I don't want much to do with you for a while.
Boy, long as that.
But it wasn't like that with Jesus at all. Instead, he said, I want to spend some special time with you. Instead of pushing the disciples away, he drew them closer to himself. When Jesus came to the coast, verse 13, when Jesus came to the coast of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?
Okay.
So what does Jesus do? He takes a retreat. He takes a trip with his disciples. They withdrew from the predominantly Jewish region of Galilee, and they came to a place that was more populated by Gentiles. Likely, this was a retreat from the pressing crowds. Everywhere they went, there were crowds of hundreds, not thousands, wanting to be healed because of what Jesus was doing. He was healing the sick, the lame, the maimed, and he got a name. And so when they saw Jesus or heard where he was going to go, they went there.
This is hard times.
So Jesus was looking for a place to go where he could get a little peace and quiet, just a little bit. So they go to the coast of Caesarea Philippi, which is 25 miles northeast of the Sea of Galilee. The population there was mainly non-Jewish. So we'll go to verse 13 again. It says, when Jesus came into the coast of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? Now, what's amazing is where Jesus asked this question. Caesarea Philippi was an area associated with idols and rival deities. Now, I remember Dad telling me about this place when he went over to Israel. It's a beautiful place. what with rocks and the waterfalls and streams and trees. And some people think this is the most beautiful place over there in Israel. But there's a great big rock out where the fountain of the waters come forth from, and on it are idol carvings in the rocks, because this is a place that was given to the worship of the Roman gods, small g, the god Pan, small p, no, it's a large p, small g, and the worship of Caesar. It was as if Jesus deliberately said, I'm going to go to the background of these other religions where these other gods are worshipped, and I'm going to establish that I'm a different kind of God.
Well, he was the teacher.
What was the main difference of him and these other gods? He said, I am the true and living God.
He's the one only God.
Living God. And it's right there that he asked this question, who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? Please keep in mind that Jesus didn't ask this question because he was insecure of himself. You know, sometimes we as men, we may do this, you know. What do people think about me? Do people like me? I hope people like me. I want people to like me.
Sure.
But Jesus isn't like that at all. Jesus wasn't a man searching for his own identity. He didn't walk around saying, I don't know who I am. Could somebody tell me who I am? Who do you think I am? It wasn't like that at all. No, Jesus did not have some sad, unfortunate dependence on the opinion of other people. He asked the question, whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am, as an introduction to a more important follow-up question. So now we have to get the answer in verse 14, I mean. Verse 14 says, and they said, some say thou art John the Baptist, some Elijah, and others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets. Now, if somebody told me I would preach like John the Baptist, I would say, thank you. Oh, that's nice of you to say. It would be a compliment if somebody said that about me or any other preacher on this earth. But it's not a compliment to Jesus, because no matter what other people thought, this was a low estimation of who Jesus really was. He was so much greater than John the Baptist.
Savior of the world.
He was so much greater than Elijah.
Savior of all people.
He was so much greater than Jeremiah. But it's interesting that this is what people thought of Jesus. Unless people think of Jesus as their Lord and Savior, it makes no difference what they think of him. Amen. Now, that was the introduction to the greater question that's found here in verse 14. Let's start again with 14. And they said, some say thou art John the Baptist, some Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. Verse 15 says, he saith unto them, but whom say you that I am? I think this was the real question Jesus was getting at. This was the reason that he brought them to Caesarea Philippi. This was the reason why he asked, who do men say that I am?
Building them up.
He says, who do you say that I am? I want you to notice something right off. Jesus assumed that his disciples would have a different opinion than the rest of the world, right?
Yes.
He didn't just say, oh, well, I guess y'all think the same thing. No, I know what the world thinks. Some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, some Jeremiah, but I'm going to assume that my disciples think differently of me. Who do you say that I am?
The question we asked today.
Jesus asked them as individuals what they believed about him. Now, this is a question placed before every person who hears of Jesus, by the way. It's not Jesus who is judged by our answer. It is we ourselves who are judged by our answer. When Jesus says to you, who do you say that I am? It doesn't change who Jesus is, but it changes who you are for all eternity. You could say we answer this question every day by what we believe and what we do. If we really believe that Jesus is who he says that he is, then it's going to affect the way we live.
It's answerable.
Now, verse 16 says, and Simon Peter answered and said, here goes Peter, he's going to tell him, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Now, Peter understood that Jesus was not just the Messiah, the Christ, but that he was also the Son of the living God. Now, this is saying two different things, but they're not contradicting each other. When he called him the Messiah, that meant he was the national redeemer, the hope of Israel. But to call him the Son of the living God means Peter was calling him God himself. Let's see what Jesus' response was. Verse 17, and Jesus answered and said unto him, Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. Verse 18, I say unto thee, thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom, and whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Then charged he his disciples that they should tell no man that he was Jesus the Christ. That's kind of funny there. And don't tell nobody, but I think everybody kind of, well, they knew he was something. They just didn't think he was the Messiah. So, in closing here, in verse 17, Jesus looks at Peter square in the face and says, You're blessed, Peter. And I'll tell you why you're blessed. Because flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. Peter, you spoke this by divine inspiration. Even if you didn't realize it was divine inspiration, you can only know this about me. You can only know who I really am if God himself reveals it to you. So Peter knew this about Jesus by divine inspiration. You need an understanding of Jesus that goes beyond flesh and blood knowledge. Oh, you might know a lot about Jesus. You might think that the best way for you to know Jesus would be to live with him in flesh and blood relationship. For you to get in a time machine and go back 2,000 years. That'd be something, wouldn't it? And live and walk with Jesus and his disciples and hear his voice and watch him move and see him do miracles and have a flesh and blood knowledge of Jesus. And let me tell you, that would be nice, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be great? I'm sure you'd be blessed. It is even more important to have a knowledge of Jesus that comes from the revelation by God the Father. And I would say this, anybody that is born again, anybody who knows Jesus in a saving way, only knows it because God the Father has revealed to them who Jesus really is. Now, doesn't that strike you sometimes as remarkable that you can have great scholars, people who know the Bible frontwards and backwards. They know how to read Greek and Hebrew. They're experts. They're scholars. Yet they don't know who Jesus is at all. Why? Because they have not received this revelation from God as to who Jesus really is. Well, I'm going to leave it right there for today. We're going to start with verse 21 next week.